This is the Truth Network.
Hidden treasures of the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. There are verses of encouragement, and there's verses of encouragement in this verse today. Oh, wow, I feel like I could take on the world. It is so spectacular, so amazing. And so we'll just jump in. We're in the Song of Solomon, the verse, chapter 3, and we are now at the verse Zion. And boy, is it in so many amazing. So I'll just read it in English, and we'll jump in. So behold, his bed, which is Solomon's, 80 valiant men are about it, of the valiant of Israel. Of course, you can read Rashi on this, and they're talking about, the allegory being that this is literally, the Levites carrying the Ark of the Covenant through the desert, and I get that. And they certainly point out that the word Solomon, as does Matthew Henry, that the word Solomon is used very sparingly within this book, but this is one of the times that it's mentioned. And when it's mentioned, of course, it's made reference to God. And in our view in the church, it's a reference to Jesus himself. So that gives us a lot of clues as why we should be so encouraged by this verse. But it says, behold his bed, which is Solomon's, which is saying this is Jesus's bed here. And you got to ponder that a minute. But Matthew Henry gives us some wisdom here. He says the bed of Jesus is your heart. That is where he rests. It really is. If you look in Ephesians 3, come to me, all ye who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Well, were you resting in his bed, which is your heart? I mean, that's the place where you meet with Jesus. That's where the tabernacle is. And that is, in fact, how spectacular is that? What we just described. Because in verse 6, when it says, who is that cometh out of the wilderness like a pillar of smoke, right? Perfumed with myrrh and frankincense and all powders of the merchant. That's your heart. That's the church. This is Solomon's bed. It's one and the same. I mean, how cool is that? This is where Jesus is going to hang out in his church's hearts. There's so much there. And then if you're in the masculine journey, or hopefully you've got brothers in the Lord in some way, shape, or form, this next few words just mean so very much. It says 80 valiant men, which, for those of us in this generation, that means 60. And 60 is a, important number in a lot of different ways. They're valiant, and then they're valiant of Israel. So the word valiant in Hebrew is, I think, extremely important in this being the Gimel chapter, which is the third chapter. And as we're talking about, it's a picture of the letter Gimel. Well, valiant starts with a Gimel, and it has to do with greatness and against abundance. And, that clearly fits with valiant. But then the next letters really indicate sons, okay? And when you think about valiant sons, I mean, essentially, those are your brothers. And so a band of brothers is kind of what this is indicating, is these valiant, these great sons. And then they're not only sons, but they're sons of Israel. And when it says Israel, that means they are God wrestlers. Or these are people that pray. These are people that have been trained, as they'll go about in future verses, talk about that these guys are trained in prayer and Bible study and these kind of things. These brothers, of which, are just extremely helpful with your keeping and protecting your heart. Because here again, we're talking about this bed, and the word bed in Hebrew, again, is a beautiful picture of Jesus. It's a mem. So that means more. It means Messiah. It means a lot of things. But the first letter is the letter mem. And then a tet, which means goodness. So like Jesus' goodness, it's there in your heart, right? And then the last letter is a hey. So it's like it's saying that this is Jesus' goodness is expressed, is his bed. It's that place of rest. And this is where we meet with him. And this is what, it travels through the desert. And we're going to get a lot into that in future verses because we're going to spend some time on it. But just for this verse, we just go, oh my goodness, how amazing is it that here this is coming out of the wilderness. It's our hearts. And they are, in fact, Jesus's bed, and they are guarded by 60 valiant brothers. Now, you may wonder, where do these guys come from? Well, Jesus makes reference that there may be more than 60, okay? In fact, the Jews teach that 60 is a way of indicating, sort of like the 600,000 Jews that came out of Egypt, or the 600,000 fighting men that came out of Egypt, as that may be. But in Jesus' case, you might remember in Mark chapter 10, in and around verse 30, he talks about those who would leave, fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, lands, and wives and children, for your sake and my sake of the gospel, will not fail to receive in this life, in this time, right, 100 or more mothers and sisters and brothers and lands and persecutions. Okay, so we're going to need them to be warriors. But here's this amazing promise that Jesus is giving us for those, and I am so blessed when I think about it. If you sit down and try to count out your 100, I'll bet you got them. And some of those might be sisters, or mothers. But these are people that are trained in wrestling with God, and they are guarding your heart. And to think about these people that every single day are praying for you and coming for your sake and guarding your heart, and just think what a spectacular thing this is. And I don't think there was any way in the world I would have been able to see this as clearly had I not experienced the band of brothers that I have. And to say that they're mighty men of valor would be an understatement. I mean, these men have wrestled with some serious, serious things with God in their own lives, because I know their story and I know the things that they've wrestled with. And I know the extent of their battle training. And we do these boot camps, of course, and we've been together for a number of years. And I'm hoping, that you have such a group. But let me just say, you got one man right here. And I pray for my listeners every single day. In fact, on my way in, I always like to pray about those who will listen to this podcast and ask that God will, plant seeds in their hearts so that they will, in fact, also want to become, somebody else's valiant 60 or 100 or whatever number that the number may be. Obviously, as we come out of the wilderness and all of us make up Jesus's bed, it's going to be a spectacular thing, a mighty men of valor. But what an honor it is to have dear, dear brothers who share with you, that are needy out loud, that tell you where it is that they're struggling, so that you can fight for their hearts and fight for their place where they can rest in Jesus, meet with Jesus, and commune with him. And so I don't know about you, but this just, as you sit there and really think about all the people that God has put in your life that are out there praying for you and for your heart. And again, we're going to get into this in more detail in the next coming verses, but just to see that I honestly, until this morning, never really grasped all this concept, is that my heart is Jesus's bed. But I am so in love with this idea, and I'm so in love with what Matthew Henry points out here, is that, oh yeah, of course, it is the place of rest. And when you can meet with him and truly commune with him, I mean, I know your blood pressure goes down, your heart goes down. In other words, you're just completely at peace. Where else could it be but in your heart? I mean, how cool is that? And I'm so glad I got to share that with you this morning. I hope it encourages you. Oh, man, I hope it encourages you. And thank you so much for the journey and a chance to pray for you, because it's pretty cool to be somebody else's 60 or 100 or whatever, Jesus gives us. Thank you for listening.